First, George, that big sit-down exclusive interview you had with the president's former attorney, Michael Cohen. He's breaking his silence.
Yeah, first time since the FBI raided his offices back in April. This was quite a weekend, quite an interview. Let's set the stage first on who Michael Cohen is. Remember, he's the president's longtime personal attorney, also his political fixer. He's in the middle of a lot of complicated cases. That Stormy Daniels case, the porn star. He was negotiating for the Trump Tower in Moscow, and what he's always been is the loyalist for President Trump. Remember, he famously said he would take a bullet for President Trump. That's what appears to be changing right now. I've spent hours with him over the last several months, 45 minutes in a Manhattan hotel room on Saturday. He's very much now his own man. I wanted to get into some of the specifics. Starting out with one of the big questions I asked him is, what will you do if prosecutors come to you and offer you leniency in return for information on President Trump? Now, he said he wanted to respect the process, didn't get into specifics, but he added this, and he added this with emphasis. My wife, my daughter, and my son have my first loyalty and always will. I put family and country first. Nothing there about loyalty to President Trump. In fact, he didn't praise President Trump at all during that 45-minute interview. I followed up with him again. I said, but wait a second, Michael, you're facing the real prospect of having to choose between protecting your family and protecting President Trump. He says again, family is my first priority. Now, we should say here, again, Michael Cohen has not been charged with anything yet. He has not faced any charges, but he has hired a new attorney, and he did say that he would be, once he understands what charges might be filed against me, if any at all, I will defer to my counsel, Guy Petrillo, for guidance on future response. Now, this is important as well. Up until now, Michael Cohen has had different attorneys, and these are attorneys who've been part of a joint agreement with President Trump's attorneys. Once Guy Petrillo comes on board, that's expected to be at the end of this week, that joint agreement with President Trump's attorneys is going to end. That is a significant move. I did not give up this central question, though. Went back at Cohen a third time and said, wait a second, Michael. I've heard you say in the past you take a bullet for President Trump. I said, I've heard you say you'll always be loyal. You'll do anything to protect him. All he said in response, and he said this with emphasis, to be crystal clear, my wife, my daughter, and my son, and this country have my first loyalty. That is a very, very different message from what we've seen from Michael Cohen in the past. And Cecilia, one of the things I said to him after hearing all this and hearing him go on the record with this for the first time, I said, you know, there's a good chance that President Trump and his team are going to come after you. They're going to come after you hard.
Because they had said he wouldn't flip. The president had said he did not think he would flip.
And this is where he also stiffened his spine. He actually visibly straightened up in his seat and then said this: I will not be a punching bag as part of anyone's defense strategy. I am not a villain in any story and won't allow others to try and depict me in that way. As I said, what we're seeing here is Michael Cohen as his own man. The Trump loyalist breaking his silence also seems to be breaking free in a real way.
Why do you think he's doing this? Why is he sending a message to the president? Is he trying to cut a deal? Why is he doing this?
Well, again, he says, as far as cutting a deal, he respects the process of the prosecutors. And remember, he has not been charged with anything yet. In fact, he hasn't even talked to the Mueller team, the Mueller investigators, sending a signal to the president, sending a signal to the country, sending a signal to his family. And I think, as he said in that last statement right there, he feels he's been portrayed as the villain in this story. He's been holding that inside, and he wants to get it out.
So he is under investigation by the feds here in Manhattan. They're looking into his business dealings, including likely that payment to Stormy Daniels, that now infamous payment. We know that they've seized 4 million files, 13, I believe, cell phones of his. But unlike President Trump, he doesn't have harsh words for the feds.
Well, this was really interesting. Remember, the president and his allies have compared the FBI raid to, his allies at least, have compared it to stormtroopers. The president called it a witch hunt. Very, very different message from Michael Cohen. He said, I don't agree with those who demonize or vilify the FBI. I respect the FBI as an institution as well as their agency. He said, in fact, when the FBI came to his hotel suite at the Regency Hotel in Manhattan back in April, they were very courteous. They were very professional. In fact, he said when they left, he shook their hands. What's at issue here in the Southern District likely is this non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels, the porn star. Michael Cohen made that payment, $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels in return for her silence. In the past, he's always said that he did this on his own initiative. So I asked him during this interview, did President Trump direct you to make that payment? Did he promise in advance to reimburse you? Here's what he had to say. I want to answer. One day I will answer. But for now, I can't comment further on advice of my counsel. To me, that was a very, very big signal.
Wow, exactly. He is also ensnarled in the questions about Russian meddling in the 2016 election. These two different investigations, Robert Mueller's investigation going alongside. He doesn't like the term witch hunt, he says.
Again, disagrees with the president. He said, when I asked him, I said, the president is calling the Mueller investigation a witch hunt. He said, I don't like the term witch hunt. As an American, I repudiate any foreign government's attempt to interfere in our democratic process, and I would call on all Americans to do the same. And in fact, he went on further. Remember last week, President Trump put out a tweet on the Russia investigation where he said, well, President Putin has denied these allegations, something the president had said in the past. Michael Cohen took that on directly. Simply accepting Putin's denial is unsustainable. I choose to believe our intelligence agencies. Again, a major break from President Trump there. Now, I should say on the Mueller investigation, there have been a lot of allegations against Michael Cohen. Did he go to Prague to meet with Russians? Did he collude with Russians in any way? He absolutely denies that, says he didn't have anything to do with Russia, even though he was negotiating the Trump Tower in Moscow, and he's confident that Mueller will find that he did nothing wrong. Significantly, however, Robert Mueller's investigators have not yet reached out to Michael Cohen and done an interview. I also asked him about that infamous Trump Tower meeting, remember, back in June 2016, where members of the Trump campaign met with Russians.
Don Jr.
On Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, promising dirt on Hillary Clinton. He said he was not in that meeting. In fact, he wasn't part of the campaign, but he was in Trump Tower. And I asked him directly, did President Trump know about that meeting in advance? And here's what he had to say about that. He said it was something, again, he could not answer. This is something he would want to answer in an official forum. So this was really remarkable here. Again, the questions he wouldn't answer.
Really quickly, were you surprised at how direct and how strong his answers were?
On that stuff, again, he wouldn't go into specifics on the cases, but on how strong he was in declaring his loyalty to family and country first, not President Trump. Very different message from we've heard in the past. Dan Abrams has been sitting here taking notes during this whole conversation. So what's your take on it?
Well, this is striking. You don't do this interview and say these things unless you're looking for a possible deal with the Southern District of New York. Remember, this is not the same office as Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller sent this case to the Southern District of New York. So in theory, this is an office that reports to Donald Trump. And what I found so striking about your interview is the questions he would answer versus the questions he wouldn't answer. And the questions he would answer are the ones where it seems, I think he feels safe, right? He's saying I didn't do anything
exactly.
Wrong. So he's perfectly happy to talk about that. He's perfectly happy to talk about how kind he thought the FBI agents were, which is a sort of amazing statement. He's saying they're there raiding his office, and he's saying how polite they were. But he won't answer all the questions, which are the sorts of things that prosecutors are going to want to know answers to. And he's holding back on those issues. Probably on advice of counsel, of course, but it is really striking to look at the difference there.
And part of get into that, explain what's happening there. A lawyer would tell him, listen, you don't know if you're going to be charged with something, you don't know what you're going to be charged with. We can't give up the whole game right now.
It's an interesting point that we're at right now as to how did we get here, right? Because, prosecutors typically will say if they're charging someone, okay, well, is there anything you want to add? But he hasn't been charged yet. So we're now at this sort of purgatory where he hasn't been charged, and yet it sure sounds like he's saying, but I've got information for you if you are going to charge me.
And remember, they've collected so many documents over the last several weeks and months as well.
And that raises another question, which is attorney-client privilege. Remember, he is not just Donald Trump's attorney. He is also Donald Trump's longtime business partner. And in matters where he was not serving his attorney, the attorney-client privilege would not apply.
Final point, the significance of breaking this defense pact that he's been in with President Trump's attorneys.
Well, that sends a clear signal. We're no longer in this together. This now says, I am no longer part of Donald Trump's team. when it comes to this defense, because up to this point, they're sharing information, they're sharing documents, and that's now going to end. His lawyer is someone who was a leader in this office, this very office, the Southern District. He may have even hired some of the people who are working on this case. So very important also to think about who he's now hired as his lawyer.
Big step over the weekend. Dan, thanks very much.
We'll wait to see what the president has to say on this.